Velvet Revolution was a monumental Czechoslovak revolution that changed the fate of the country. It took place in between November 17th through the 27th in Prague, Czechoslovakia. It stood out among other revolutions because it was a peaceful revolution. The Austro-Hungarian Empire overtook Czechoslovakia in 1867. This empire ruled them until 1918, when Tomáš Masaryk helped Czechoslovakia reach independence. He is Czech, but he lives in Pittsburgh, so he invited members of the Austro-Hungarian Empire into Pittsburgh, where he offered an undisclosed amount of money to the Austro-Hungarian Empire in exchange for freedom of Czechoslovakia. It was called the Pittsburgh Agreement, and it was passed in 1918. Unfortunately, Masaryk wasted his money because the Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed later that year. Czechoslovakia, over the next 20 years, became a very rich country with a strong military, independent government, and a great economy due to great sales of china, beer, and cars. In 1938, they were overtaken by Nazi Germany during World War II because 25% of the Czech population was German. When the Nazis surrendered in 1945, many countries in Eastern Europe after World War II were in ruins. The Soviet Union noticed these countries and spread their idea of communism around Europe by saying that communism would help their country after the war get back to their original state. They gave every country the opportunity to vote for communism. The majority in 1948, and they fell under the Iron Curtain. The Iron Curtain was what people called the area overtaken by communists because no one could go in or go out. The only people able to leave and come back were important people in the government or people with special passes. At first, the communists promised fair and free elections, but it became apparent very soon that that would not happen. Over the next 40 years, there were very few revolutions, but some people still chose to retaliate. One example of those people was named Alexander Dubček. In 1968, he became prime minister, and even though he was a socialist, he attempted reform in Czechoslovakia. He gave people more independence, like letting news reporters criticize the government, removing censorship from movies and books, and allowing free speech. This retaliation was known as the Prague Spring, but it came to an end very quickly when the Russians invaded Czechoslovakia and replaced Dubček. This inspired Václav Havel, a playwright that was a big figure in later Czech revolutions. During the 1970s, the Prague Underground was formed, which was an underground culture that wrote books, poems, and music that was anti-communist. People in this revolution included the plastic people of the universe, who were imprisoned for their lyrics and their music, and Václav Havel, who was imprisoned for criticizing the government. In 1968, a young man named Jan Palach couldn't stand the communists, so he decided to burn himself. From that year forward, they had an annual ceremony commemorating him. At that ceremony on November 17, 1989, people started singing Jeno budem dál, or in English, We Shall Overcome, and then began marching into Prague. The police broke up the peaceful protest, but it started an outrage throughout the country. The following days after the march, the civic reform, led by Václav Havel, organized hundreds of protests throughout Czech Republic. Havel said, "Is the human word truly powerful enough to change the world and influence history?" This quote was known by all the protesters, and what it meant was that the protesters were to use only words and no physicality. People started gathering in Prague on November 18th, and by November 20th, an astonishing 500,000 people had come to protest in Prague. As the amount of protesters continued growing, on November 24th, many of the top communist officials stepped down from office. Havel wanted the entire country to help them with the cause, so he set up a general protest throughout the country, which was going to go on from 2 to 4 p.m. on November 27th. When that time came, workers walked out of offices and factories, stores and businesses closed down, and public transportation stopped. 75% of the population reported to have protested in those 2 hours. The communists gave up the following day, giving the people of Czech Republic the freedom they deserved. The communists allowed free elections from that point on, and they finally collapsed in 1991. Due to many disagreements, the Czechoslovakia split up to Czech Republic and Slovakia in 1993. Václav Havel, a big figure in this revolution, became the president of the country. This revolution is an inspiration to the current citizens of Czech Republic and to many people around the world, because if you can negotiate without violence, what is the need for violence?